Welcome to this presentation and in-depth tutorial of Berna3. Berna is a software simulation of a 1950s, early 1960s electronic music studio modeled after the equipment found at the Rai Studio di Phonologia here in Milan and the WDR Westdeutscher Rundfunk, a studio of electronic music in Cologne, founded by Herbert Heimert and then directed by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. So the idea is to simulate electronic music how it was made before the advent of the synthesizer in the late 1960s. And to make electronic music back then, the Germans and then later the Italians had the idea to use test equipment. This test equipment was basically radio laboratory equipment used for test signals, filters, modulators, and stuff like this to work at the radio. And these scientific instruments were used to, to modulate signals and prepare them or to analyze them, and basically they are electronic test equipment, which nowadays we still have in digital format for many of the applications here. And the electronic music, so it was made with this equipment and tape recorders. Berna has different numbers of tape recorders. For example, we have a master 2-track tape recorders here. And then we have a 4-track tape recorder and 4 independent tape loopers here. So we have plenty of instruments to record sound and to manipulate sounds. At the core of the software, there's a mixer. We have 8 channels coming from the matrix, which I will explain in a few seconds. And then 8 channels coming back from the tape return of the 4-track tape recorder and the 4 loops. And we have 2 matrices. The matrix is the core of the software. The software is fully modular, and the matrix works in a similar way to the EMS VCS3 synthesizer. So here at the top, we have oscillator, filters, modulators, etc. outputs. And at the left, we have all the equipment inputs. So here is the mixer, for example, and we have the oscillators here. So for example, if I want to route oscillator A to the first channel of the mixer, I just click here and then I make a connection between the oscillator output and the mixer input. But the software has also another matrix, which is the internal matrix of the mixer. So the mixer is fully modular, as it is in reality. Every mixer has a patch bay. So the mixer channel 1 is now routed to the master output, clicking this point here. So now we will bring up the oscillator. We turn it on and we select a frequency. You can use the dial as a potentiometer or the central potentiometer as a fine-tuning dial. The dial is fully mappable like every potentiometer here with your MIDI controller. Okay, now that we have a frequency, we have a volume up, we just raise the volume here. And we can hear the sound of the oscillator. I took great care of making each oscillator different in sound. They have their own timbre. They have their harmonic distortion, typical of tube equipment. So every oscillator has a peculiar sound. Now, we have this oscillator patched to the channel 1, and we can see here on the meters it's working. And the master fader is connected to the 2-track tape recorder. So if we want to record straight away this sound, we just have to select here the length of the tape. Let's say we want 240 seconds tape. Remember that when you change the length of the tape, you erase the buffer, so you erase basically the tape. So keep in mind this. And then we can simply press record and we have our oscillator recorded. And when we want to listen back to the master tape, we take this fader up and we press play here. And if instead I want to record this oscillator to the 4-track tape recorder, I just have to change the connection of the mixer matrix. Instead of going to the master output, I will go to the 4-track tape recorder channel 1 in, and then from the 4-track tape recorder channel 1, I will go to the master to listen to the tape return. So we rise here this one, and we rise the tape return here, and then we arm the track so we can listen, and then we press record. Of course, you can choose here again the tape length. By default is 120 seconds, but you can select how many seconds you want, of course. Then we press record, and we can see that we are recording the sound. And then we can press stop and unarm the track and listen back the tape. It's funny that I had the tape inertia. So you have this kind of frequency modulation, the tape starting up and slowing down. We have here, which with every tape recorder head position, so we can select exactly the tape, the point of the tape we want to listen or where to record. For example, if I want to start here, I arm the track and I start recording, and the tape will start recording from this position, just like in a real tape recorder. And we have 4 tracks, and whenever you want, you can export the single track into a WAV file or an EF file, whatever. And if you want, you can also import your tracks by dragging and dropping the sound in the window of the correspondent track. So it's very handy, and it can do many things. Even though you cannot edit the tape itself, it's a good instrument and pretty realistic. So let's see something more interesting about this dual oscillator A. Let's connect it back to the master fader out here. Okay. And if we take a look at the oscillators, we have different controls here. This is, of course, the output volume, and we have a scale of the volume. Can go in some funny analog distortion. And then we have a different waveform. We have also the triangle waveform, which can be, we can change the duty cycle, the symmetry of the waveform. So basically it passed from triangle to sawtooth and back. And we have also internal and external FM modulation. With this switch here, we are now in the external modulation. So we can take, for example, another oscillator, the oscillator B, and we must connect the output of oscillator B in the FM input of oscillator 1. So it's like this. And then we, of course, turn it on, select a frequency, and we turn this up. Let's select a very slow frequency, for example, 6 or 7 Hertz. And then we have to raise the frequency deviation, which is basically the FM index. And here we go. But we have also an internal modulation. If I go here now, we have an internal sawtooth modulator, which we control its intensity here and the frequency here. Now let's see another oscillator which I very like is the Sine random generator. This generator is a sine oscillator which can be modulated by noise. Let's clear the matrix and we take the sine random output and we plug it to the mixer channel 1. And the mixer matrix is okay because we have channel 1 routed to the master output, and then we select a frequency and we turn up the volume, and okay, I took the wrong one here. Okay, well, by default is a simple sine wave oscillator, but with this bandwidth selector we can modulate this frequency with the noise. And this is quite nice. If we use, for example, reverb, we can create some sort of funny drones. Let's do it. We take the reverb send here, and the reverb return is here, but we have to patch it again, like in real life, to the master output. So the plate reverb return is here, and now we take the plate reverb window, turn it on, and here we go. We have a nice plate reverb with different size, damping, diffusions, and decay times in seconds. So this is quite nice to create these atmospheric sounds. Okay, let's see another generator. And we are going for, well, the teeth tone generator is a low frequency oscillator, and the mesh generator is instead a standard generator. And these two models were modeled after the oscillators that Karl-Heinz Stockhausen used in the 50s for this one for Studie 2, Studie 2, and both were used in conducting. But one oscillator I want to show you is this nice AG10 square and sinusoidal oscillator. We have two outputs, so we have two different patch points in the matrix, AG10 square out, AG10 sine out. We take the sine output and we plug it again to the mixer channel 1 input. So we turn it on with this switch, which is also the amplitude control of the square wave, but we are not using the square wave output, so we are not hearing anything. And we turn up the volume. And the AG10 is quite nice and very analog sounding. And we can take a look at the waveform using the oscilloscope. So we take the signal from the AG10 sine out and we go to the oscilloscope X input, which is the horizontal input. So now we take the oscilloscope here and we simply turn it on, and here we have this waveform. As you can see, we don't have a perfect sinusoidal waveform, and this is because the software is simulating the analog behavior of tube equipment. Every single oscillator has a different behavior, a different timbre, even though they are making sinusoidal waveforms. By talking about the oscilloscope, we have here a couple of typical control, like the intensity and the vertical output, the amplitude, and the time base. The time base is used to calibrate the internal oscillator of the oscilloscope to the frequency of the generator we are analyzing. So we use this control to see very slow waveform or fast waveforms depending by the input. Now you see that the waveform keeps shifting at the left or right, and that depends because the internal oscilloscope oscillator is not synchronized to the external oscillator we are analyzing. But for this reason, we use a trigger function that stops this shifting and gives us a typical trigger of the oscilloscopes. So one feature of this instrument is distortion. And for example, I turn down the volume and I use this output at 10 volts instead of 1 volt, and we hear a very, very nice analog distortion. It's very aggressive. Very rich in very nice partials. So this oscillator can distort pretty nicely. And as you can see, we don't have any control of the frequency except for the dial and the master potentiometer, because those instruments were not musical instruments. Actually, they didn't work with keyboards. That happened in the late 60s with Wendy Carlos and the Moog synthesizer. This oscillator were used as fixed frequencies, except in some occasions where in some device you can use the frequency modulation input. For example, the oscillator 1, which has this input. So don't expect to use this software with a musical keyboard, because it's not a synthesizer. We are strictly emulating faithfully the original equipment of the 50s. And for example, if I want to make this oscillator to create some random frequencies, I will show you the technique we must use. So first up, we again plug the matrix from oscillator 1 to mixer 1 input. And now we have this steady tone, and we can raise this external modulation and frequency deviation, and now we will send some signal, some random signal to the frequency to change it. Now, first of all, we will use a pulse generator to generate a steady clock. And okay, here we have some 10 Hertz clock. And this is basically a square wave generator, only positive from 0 to 1. And then we will plug this pulse output to the sample and hold trigger in. We have a comparator and sample and hold circuit here. There are two different functions. The sample and hold, as you know, takes a trig, which is our pulse, and a voltage, a random voltage in the signal input, and we will use the noise generator. And then we take the output of the sample and hold and comparator, no, sample and hold output, and we take a look first off at the waveform in the oscilloscope. So the comparator is here. We turn it on in, and we select the sample and hold mode. Then we take the oscilloscope, turn it on, and let me see. Okay. Let me see what we haven't do. So sample and hold output, oscilloscope output, yes. Pulse in the trig and comparator signal. Oh yes, we missed the noise here. The noise generator is interesting because it can work also as a compressor. Of course, you have a separate input here in this part, the compressor in. So mind that this is not just noise generator, but it is also a compressor. Okay, we have the noise generator going on, and now if we look at the oscilloscope, we are seeing some random voltages going on. And we can use these random voltages to frequency modulate the oscillator A. So we take the sample and hold output and we go to the FN input of oscillator A. Here we go. Okay, what about envelopes? Well, there are no envelope generators here because this is not a synthesizer. But back in the day, you could use a pulse like the one we are using, and you can filter it. So let's take the pulse output and we go to the high precision high pass filter here. So pulse 1 high precision high pass filter now is connected. And we take the output of this filter, the high precision high pass filter, and we go to the oscilloscope so we can see what actually happens. The high precision high pass filter is a special filter, is one order high pass filter. So it's just 6 dB but 4 octave filter. And we take the frequency around 10 Hertz. And we take a look at the oscilloscope now. And as you can see, what was before a square wave now has become an envelope with a sharp attack and an exponential decay. And the decay depends by the frequency of the high pass filter. So at 0, we have the square wave, and going farther and farther on higher frequencies, the length of the envelope decreases. As a matter of fact, at 200 Hertz, we have a very, very small pulse. And at 17 Hertz, something better, we will go for 10 Hertz, more or less the same frequency of the pulse generator. Now that we have this envelope, we will use a modulator, a balance modulator, as a kind of VCA. So we have two inputs. We have two modulators. We have input mod and input car. This is modulation input and this is carrier input. So we'll put the envelope in the modulation input. So again, it's the high precision high pass filter inside the modulation input. And then we'll take the sound of the oscillator and we will go inside the carrier input. And then from the modulator output to the mixer. The modulator can work as VCA or balance modulator, or as a ring modulator. Depends how you use it. Then we can put this up and then we go. And of course, if we change the frequency of the pulse generator, we slow it down. We can add some nice echo to the sound. So first off, we take the echo return and we go to the master fader here. And we take the echo, rise this, send, echo level, return, and there we go. Let's say I want to record a loop from this sound. So I unpatch the matrix here and we go from channel 1 to loop 1 and we send also the echo to the loop and then the output of the loop to the master fader here. So we have the loop here, return. We have our echo and loop 1 here. Now we turn it on and we hear the tape return from the loop. Of course, it's in mono, not anymore stereo, because this tape is mono. But we can add some stereo effects at the end of recording. So we can start recording here. Some nice effects, changing the length of the echo. Okay, let's say that I'm happy with this. And of course, the loop is not complete, but I can select the loop and trim it. So I can play this part over and over in loop. Okay, and one thing you can do with the loop is to change speed. Or slow it down. And another thing you can do is to go in reverse. Okay, let's stop it here for a second and we will record another loop. So the procedure is just the same, you just change the patch points from mixer channel output 1 to loop 2 input and the echo return to loop 2 and the output of the second loop routed to the master output. Okay, this is the second. This is our original sound. And we can start recording back again and tweak a little bit this funny sounds, bloopy sounds. It's kind of similar to a Krell patch. This is the way electronic music was done in the 1950s. And we can appreciate every single step. with this very accurate simulation. Okay, back again to the looper. I like it. And I once again trim the loop so I can play it over and over and over without silence, and press play. And you see I have this again, this tape inertia. There is this pitch changing when I start it on and slow it down like the real tape. So now I have two different loops going, and I can add again some delay or reverb, but I must send it to the master fader. So we raise these friends here, and we will use also the reverb. It's quite easy to create a lot of interesting atmospheres. So one thing I, of course, can do is to record a master tape of this. Because we are going to the master fader, we are already set for record. We erase this tape and we start pressing record, and we are recording our file. In reality, we're not recording on a hard disk in this moment, but we are recording on a buffer. So we are recording on the memory of the computer. So before everything else, after we recorded, we must export the file so we can store it in our hard disk. Okay, I'm happy with this, and I press stop here and here. And if I want to hear back what I just recorded, I press play. And of course, if I want to export this file, I just press this button and I will have a window to export the file as I wish. Let's see something else. Let's clear down the matrix and the mixer matrix. So we start from scratch. And I want to show you the Lietty Oscillator. This was designed by Alfredo Lietty, a physicist of the RAI television in Italy, for the Studio di Fonologia. One of the peculiarities of the Studio di Fonologia was that the studio had 9 oscillators, which back then in 1954 was a huge technological advancement. Actually, in 1954, the Italian electronic music studio was the biggest and well-equipped music studio of the world for electronic music. Now, once again, we must use the matrix, and we are plugged to channel 1, and to hear the sound, we must, of course, again, route the signal from the mixer channel 1 to the master output. And here we have this wonderful sound. Now, every oscillator at RAI Studio had 6 different frequency range. And there were 9 oscillators, but every oscillator had different frequency range. So they were tuned to different frequencies. So, but this control, you can have all the 9 oscillator original frequencies. So it simulates perfectly the work of the Alfredo Lietty oscillator. Now let's take a look to something else. And for example, we have this sweep oscillator, which is the more complex and complete oscillator of Berna. Now this oscillator is in reality two oscillators. We have a function generator here and another function generator here, and this one can modulate this one in different ways. For example, I can use the upper oscillator to FM the first oscillator here. This is the frequency and the frequency range of the second oscillator, while this is the frequency of the first oscillator with the range. We have different waveforms, of course, for modulating the oscillator or the principal oscillator. And we have another function here, which is the sweep. Now, to sweep the principal oscillator, we select sweep here, we raise this one, and then we select the sweep function. And then at this frequency, we have a long sweep of the principal oscillator. And the oscillator number 2 can be also frequency modulator by an external signal. We have here a sweep oscillator FM in and AM in, which will take care of different AM and FM functions. For these details, I refer to the user manual, which has everything you need to know to operate this software. This oscillator has also a trig function. So instead of having a continuous output, we can use a pulse generator, like again our pulse here, to trig the sound. So we take the pulse generator output and we go to the sweep oscillator trig in, and here we go. Okay, we added some echo. So I invite you to explore this fantastic oscillator. It has a lot of functions. And of course, Berna has quite a good number of filters. For example, one filter I really love is a third of octave filter, which I named Vieltronics after the composer Massimiliano Viel, which worked many years with Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. And this filter was used extensively at WDR Studio as well as at RAI Studio. So we take the typical signals you would patch inside this filter, which is a noise generator. We have different shapes of noise, by the way. And we connected the noise we send the noise to the filter here, and we take the output of the filter and we put it to the mixer channel 1. And I want a lot of reverb here because it sounds pretty well with reverb. And I want a very long reverb. I want something huge. And we turn it on, we raise the volume up, and then we can select the frequency. As you can hear, we can still hear some windy quality because the bandwidth of the filter is not very big. And we can make it a little bit more sharp with this control. It's very musical. And we have also an extension both in low frequency and a high frequency of this filter with the VLtronics number 2, the Zusatz filter. Again, we patch the noise generator to the filter, and we take the output of the second filter and we go to the second channel here. And again, I want a lot of reverb. Turn it on. And these are very low frequency. Another extremely fantastic filter we have here is the frequency analyzer and the tunable amplifier. Let's do for the tunable amplifier, which is one of my favorite. And we'll take the AG10 square wave output, and then from the filter we will go to the mixer channel 1. So let's go for AG10. And then let's take the tunable amplifier filter. This filter is a simulation of the UBM filter, and it has a lot of gain, and you can use resonance to close and to shorten the bandwidth of the filter, so it can distort. Let's go for a lower frequency. And we can choose a different frequency range. It's very musical, and this equipment was used to find resonance peaks and to analyze the spectrum of signals. Now let's try another filter which is very similar, which is the frequency analyzer. Similar but different. So the frequency analyzer output here, and let's open it. Okay, so first off we turn it on. Okay, we select the frequency analyzer function. And here we have the bandwidth and the frequency range and the input volumes. We can mix also the resonance part with the clean signal. This one can make funny distortion too. Let's hear it without reverb. Note that we are distorting here the signal, but you're not distortion. You have not distortion at the output, so it's controlled. And also you have here band rejection. And let's take a look at something else. Beside modulators and filters, we have a funny way to generate random pulses. These random pulses can be used for a clock or a signal. So let's take the Geiger output here. And we select the Geiger counter, which is a simulation of the Geiger counter with an X-rays generator. So we have here some random clicks, and we can generate X-rays by adding current, and then you have this artificial Geiger counter, which can be useful in many ways as a random click generator. Okay, now we'll talk about a couple of interesting functions given by gates. One of the equipment at the Rise Studio was the Turnburst Generator. This equipment is quite interesting, and it serves the scope of gating. So let the sound pass or not pass using a clock. Let's take, for example, a teeth tone generator. We select a frequency like, for example, 100 Hertz. And we go from the teeth tone generator to the Turnburst Generator signal in. And the trig in, just like before, it's again a pulse generator. And then again, from the Turnburst Generator, we will go to the output. So let's turn it on, and let's take the pulse generator. Here we go. It works immediately. So notice that we have here 2 cycles and 2 cycles. That's actually hertz. So each time it makes 2 cycles, it opens and closes, but I can change the symmetry of this opening and closing. For example, 4 cycle silence and 1 and 2 cycle open. Or vice versa. Let's make it faster. Or another thing we can do is to use the selezionatore di ampiezza. The selezionatore is an automatic gate. Let's take, for example, the noise, and we go to the variable bandpass filter. And from the variable bandpass filter, we go to the selezionatore, and from the selezionatore to the output. So, again, first off, we have the noise generator, which is on. Then we have the variable bandpass filter. Okay. And then from the variable bandpass filter goes to the selezionatore. Turn on. Okay. We create a narrow bandwidth. Okay, and then we find a threshold. We can have a long release or a short release. And this was exactly the same technique used for a piece by Repasseur called Scambi, made at the studio di fonologia here at Milan's RAI. Well, let's take a look to something else. What we have here, we have the the Transpositore di frequenza is a very nice instrument. The Transpositore is basically a frequency shifter. So let's take a few oscillators, like oscillators A, the sine random, the teeth tone, and the AG10. And then we go to the Transpositore, and then from the Transpositore, we go to the mixer output. So the Transpositore has a very nice interface here. Okay, so we have dual oscillator here. First we must mix a little bit the volumes. And then we transpose. We shift the spectrum up or low. of course, at low frequency, basically you have amplitude modulations, one sideband. And I think that's it. I covered almost the majority of the devices, even though I didn't talk about the vocoder, the comparator, which is another thing, and some other devices. I leave them to your exploration. But basically, I covered the most important aspects and facts of the software. Remember that on the master channel, you have some kind of Pultec EQ where you can attenuate the sounds on certain bands, which is useful to shape a little bit the sound. And of course, the loopers, remember, you can import sounds here, just dragging and dropping the waveform here, so you can use your own loops. And of course, you can export them on your computer. And then this is also true for the 4-track, so the 4-track tape recorder and the 2-track tape recorder. So you can eventually work them out a little bit more in your workstation, but hopefully you will learn to use this software as it is, as you are in a true 1950s environment with just this equipment. And that's the fun part of it, to use these limited resources, even though there are many resources, but they are somewhat limited compared to modular synthesizers. But they are interesting and different from modern equipment, and they bring back the original spirit of the electronic music that made great music, from Stockhausen, John Cage, Riposseur, Bruno Maderna, Luciano Berio, and many, many others, which this software want to celebrate. And I think that it will be a nice instrument for teacher as well as for students and musicians to see how electronic music was made back in the days, and maybe it can be also a creative tools for the modern music of today. I hope you did enjoy the software, and the software is now for sale at giorgiosancristoforo.net for €25. The Macintosh version is already downloadable, and the Windows version will be available in the first week of October. I think we are finishing the porting, but hold on, it's going to be a few days more, and we are ready for both platforms. If you have questions, first off, download the software, use it, and read the user manual, which is very, very important. And if a problem arises, just write me back and I'll try to answer to your problems. So thank you for listening and for watching, and have fun with Berna3.